Our custom aluminum catamaran build has been flying right along, and lately I've been putting a lot of hours into one of the most sacred places on any boat.
Hello, and welcome to the engine room.
Fitting out our engine rooms is not only an exciting project for an engineering geek like me, but it's also full of these major milestones that feel like turning points in the build. Today's focus might seem a bit less monumental than dropping in our engine, for example, but it's actually a super critical system.
My task is to start fitting out the exhaust system.
The exhaust system is one of those things that you don't really think about that much when it's doing its job. But if something were to go wrong, well, there's some major safety and technical risks that can come into play. So today we're making sure that doesn't happen by designing and fabricating a completely custom exhaust system built to handle whatever the ocean throws at it.
Hello, and welcome to the engine room. I'm not sure if you can hear anything at all because there's blowers on, there's music on, and there's sanding going on. But this is where I'm working today, and my task is to start fitting out the exhaust system.
Before we dive right in, let's take a second to go over the key components of the system and how it actually works. A marine diesel exhaust system has three main jobs. First off, to safely direct toxic exhaust gases out of the boat. Second, it cools the exhaust with seawater and then ejects the hot water out of the boat. And finally, it keeps things quiet, so it kind of acts like a muffler as well. Everything starts off here at the mixing elbow, where seawater is injected into the hot exhaust gases, which can reach temperatures of up to 400 degrees Celsius, or about 750 degrees Fahrenheit at full RPM. This seawater rapidly cools the exhaust down to about 50 degrees Celsius, or 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And from there, the mixture of seawater and exhaust gases flows down through a hose using gravity into something called the waterlock. The waterlock serves two key purposes. It prevents leftover water in the system from backfilling into the engine when you shut it off. And it also helps to muffle noise while also assisting in pushing everything out of the system. From the waterlock, the exhaust is forced up and over a gooseneck, which can either be made from a flexible hose or an off-the-shelf part. This gooseneck creates a high point in the system to prevent seawater from coming back in through the exhaust when waves hit the boat or when the boat heels over. Finally, the mixture exits the boat through a hole fitting, safely discharging both water and gases. This entire process requires energy, and the cost of making it all work safely is called back pressure. Back pressure is the resistance inside the exhaust system. The more obstacles the exhaust gases have to push through, like long hose runs, sharp bends, a too tall gooseneck, or mufflers, the harder the engine has to work to expel them. And it's the pressure of the exhaust gas that pushes everything uphill and finally out of the boat. Too much back pressure can reduce engine performance and increase fuel consumption. So the goal is to design a system with a balance between safety and efficiency. Not too high that it creates too much back pressure, but not too low that it allows seawater to come right into the hull and ruin your engine. So we've got no small task ahead of us to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. And today, we're actually going to start with the end of the system. We'll be cutting the exit hole where the hot water and exhaust gases will exit the boat.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have an aluminum tube that is welded to the hole in the boat. There's going to be a GRP tube that goes through that that's chalk fastened in. And today I'm just fitting together all the pieces.
Here I'm cutting down a 102mm aluminum pipe, not only in length, but also to achieve the desired angle in relation to the hull. I don't want it sticking straight out perpendicular to the hull, but we do need some space to be able to weld it, so it can't be too drastic of an angle. One other consideration worth pointing out in regard to the placement of the hull is that our aim here is to have it as far back towards the stern of the boat as possible and a correct height above the waterline. This is because I always hated on Delos 1 how the exhaust would leave unsightly dark streaks on the hull. I actually call it the black smudge of death. And since it was located about halfway forward on the boat, it meant that the area I needed to clean to keep her looking shiny and fresh was quite a lot. Putting the hull further back on Delos 2.0 means much less surface area to clean in the future. I was happy with the cut and the resulting angle, and after laying down the reference line, it was time to bust out the hole saw and cut a big old hole in the side of the boat.
Knock when you're ready! That took a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little harder, huh?
Does it look okay?
Yeah.
After using the hole saw as a starting point to cut away a circle, I went in with the grinder and the flapper wheel to carefully shave away the sides until it was just right.
All right, I cut the holes and Dan fills them in.
Just go back a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, hold it there. I'll get one, then you can adjust it.
Watch your eyes. Tig.
The tube was now locked in and looking pretty slick, and the following day, we were ready to dig into the next step.
So today's project is chalk fasting in the GRP tube for the exhaust. Yeah, so this is the tube. GRP just means glass reinforced plastic. It's just another way of saying fiberglass. This is a different kind of fiberglass, so this is vinyl ester. It's more resistive to corrosive things like exhaust gases, for example. And so we want to put this inside the aluminum to protect it, and we're going to chalk fast it in place.
Chalkfast is a high-strength epoxy resin used for mounting and securing components in marine and industrial applications. In this case, it will fill the gap between the aluminum and GRP tubes, creating a solid, watertight, and vibration-resistant bond. This will actually be my second foray into the world of chalkfasting. My first attempt was pretty intimidating, to be honest.
Okay, here we go.
Oh my God, I'm so nervous.
We used it to lock in the rudder bearings, a job that I can say would have been truly a disaster if we got it wrong. It was a bit of a learning curve as we figured out how to manage the viscosity and flow rates and how different materials affected the temperature and therefore how fast it would set. But what did make that job a bit simpler was the fact that in that case everything was aligned vertically, so we only had to seal the bottom. But in this case, things would be a little bit less straightforward.
The tricky thing about this is sealing off the ends, because it's not a vertical tube, it's a horizontal tube, and so I have to figure out a way to put the tube in the center of it inside the aluminum tube, seal off both ends so that when I put the chalk fast in, it doesn't leak out, and then fill the chalk fast from the top. So that's what I've been working on today.
For the inside part, I made a simple circular ring that fills the space between the tubes to block the chalk fast from leaking out, and then I can just remove it once everything is set. But the outside was a bit trickier. Since the tube was cut at an angle, the opening is actually an oval, not a circle, so I couldn't just use a standard cut round tube to create a ring like I did on the inside. But I had another plan.
And then I'm going to cut a piece of aluminum to suit this oval shape, and then I'm going to so it'll kind of be like that, and then I can just use adhesive on the aluminum that we can sand off later, and then I'll put adhesive on this slit, and that's what'll keep the chalk fast in.
So that's the oval shape.
Yep, that's what I want to cut out. fits like that, I'll stick it out a little bit extra. I can fill the gap with Sikaflex. Then after the chalk fast dies, I'll just pull this part out and throw it away.
I got it centered and glued on, and now it was time to start prepping the chalk fast, a step that's equally as important as the actual pouring.
Getting ready, huh?
I sent a query to AI, and I basically said, well, I have a tube with an outside diameter of 90 millimeters. I have another tube with an inside diameter of 102 millimeters, and I put one tube inside the other one. If it's 250 millimeters long, what is the volume in between the tubes? And it calculated it out, 452 milliliters. That's pretty cool, right?
That's crazy.
AI.
Now that we knew the volume of chalk fast that we would need, I mixed parts of the hardener and resin.
There is no turning back now.
We still had a bit left over from when we did the rudder bearings, and luckily it was just enough for this project, since the stuff is not cheap.
Your back is so wet.
It's definitely not sweat.
You can see the line there. Woo!
Okay, let's do this quick. We know this stuff gets hot.
I know.
Ready?
So ready.
Here we go. Chalk fast away.
We rigged up a little system with a large tube to pour the chalk fast in, and a smaller tube to let the air escape as the void fills up.
It's good that we get one more practice run, because next up we're gonna do the stern tubes.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a biggie.
you really don't want that one to go wrong.
Once the overflow of chalk fast starts coming up the air escape, we know it's full.
Okay, I think that was a great success. High five.
Have a chalk fast for the win. Good morning. It's been overnight, and looks like the chalk fast had cured pretty good. So I'm gonna attempt to get this temporary cover plate off and see what it looks like. I put some tape on this to try not to scratch up the hull too much. That stuff sticks pretty good, huh?
A few moments later.
I need to get a few more of these guys. Stuff's stuck good. Looks like it did a pretty good job of filling it. I'll clean up this mess and then sand it back and see what it looks like. I think that this Sika's dry enough to try and get it off. Now I'm just gonna take the razor blade, and it comes off pretty easy. Just like that.
Well, Brian just finished sanding off the axis chalk fast and adhesive, and I think it looks absolutely amazing. He just filled it. There was a little void here on the top. He just filled that in with some thickened epoxy, and when we kind of finish off the outside of the hull here, we will sand this down and paint it to kind of finish off this outside surface. But I think it ended up super good, and yeah, such a cool project done as well.
Now with the exit hole finished and the engine already in place, we have both ends of the system locked in, which means all that's left to do is connect the dots. But before we start running hoses and locking things into place, there's a big decision ahead, choosing the correct water lock. And there's a few main points that we need to take into consideration. First up, we've got to check the exhaust diameter of the mixing elbow. That's going to determine the size of everything downstream, including the fitting size of the water lock. Then there's the question of space. Where can we actually fit this thing? Water locks come in many different shapes and sizes, and we need to see which type is going to suit the space we have. And probably the most important factor, the size of the water lock itself. It's got to be big enough to contain all the downstream water in the system when the engine shuts down. I'll explain this in more detail later when we start working on the gooseneck, but for now, let's take you through our process as we tackle this choice. So I've got a couple of different styles of water locks from Vetus. Here's one of them. This is the NLP style. It's a little bit taller, but not quite as wide. This is 75 mil in, 90 mil out. This is another style that's more of a horizontal style. So this one is not quite as wide, but it's less tall. The in is higher on this one, and the out is lower. So far it looks like, after trying to fit them in, and it's, by the way, it's super awesome that Vetus is sending us all this stuff, because I basically can take like 3 different options. I have another one downstairs, it's way too long. I tried that the other day, so I have 3 different options, and I can fit each one, see which one fits like best in the space, and kind of go from there, which is super, super cool. And then I bring the ones that don't work back. After a bit of experimenting, we decided to go with the Vetus NLP water lock with a 75mm inlet and 90mm outlet that has an internal capacity of 10 liters. Ultimately, this was the only one that really fit the system in the space, but it also has some added performance perks that we're really stoked about too, like superior noise reduction, extremely low back pressure, and it's heat resistant up to 260 degrees Celsius. So it's a safe choice if we ever have any kind of cooling failure. Now the next step is to measure and cut the hose that will connect the mixing elbow to the water lock. This task was pretty straightforward, although we did run into one minor snag. So now that I have the combi mount in, I found that when I put my hose on there, I was getting a conflict on this mount. It was rubbing on that mount. So it's a very thick part of the mount, and it's reinforced here. And so what I did is I scalloped a little bit of this away to make room for the exhaust to run through here. And then if it works, we can get ourselves a stainless pipe that will weld in here, which will reinforce this part of the mount and give us a nice shade-free surface for the exhaust hose to ride on. So I'm gonna go ahead and fit this exhaust hose now, see how that lines up, see if my little scallop I cut out is in the right place. Go from there. It is ridiculously hot, so I've got to turn my fan back on, which is incredibly loud. So maybe I'll just do a time lapse or something, because here we go. I was happy with my alteration, so the next step was fabricating a bracket to mount the water lock. It's been such a blast developing my skills in metalworking. Making something as simple as a bracket might not seem like much when you look at the real pros like Dan and his team, but for a total newbie like me, just a few months ago, something as small as this would have been a real challenge. And I can guarantee Kurt would have been cracking jokes about how bad it looked.
She'll be right.
Yeah,
What's that mean?
that did like it well.
Yeah.
Probably not the first, but
She'll be right.
But each day, I'm gaining more and more confidence and adding more skills and knowledge into my toolbox. I underestimated how much I would fall in love with the process. While of course I have my days where I'm sweating my ass off, feeling totally in over my head and questioning all of our life choices. But overall, I'm incredibly stoked with the journey and all of its ups and downs. I was also pretty stoked with how this bracket came out, which I was now able to tack into place and call this phase of the project complete.
What do you think, dude? So I think a couple things. A, it's an awesome muffler. B, looks like a heck of a good step you just made yourself.
That's true, huh? That's a nice step for coming off of there. I'm having a lot of fun with that bender. 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 All right, let's head home.
Yeah.
It's late, I'm tired, and it's hot, I'm thirsty. But we got us a water lock in. That's a win. With the water lock checked off of our list, the last step will be to connect everything in the exit hole with the gooseneck. I mentioned the gooseneck briefly earlier, but I wanted to go into a little more detail about this part of the system and how we'll plan it out.
Here's the engine exhaust. This is the elbow right out of the turbo. It's 75 millimeter. The rule on this is it should go continuously down to the water lock. So you want a nice gradual curve with no sharp bends that could possibly restrict the exhaust and create back pressure, which takes away power. It goes into the water lock, which is basically a vertical chamber. And so the idea is to keep the water because the water is flowing out of the exhaust, and then it cools the engine and it goes out of the boat. And so you always have water in this tube. And so you can imagine as the engine is running, it's pushing water up, but the second you turn the engine off, that water that's in that tube comes back down, and you don't want it to go into the engine. And so one of the important purposes of this, besides making the whole system quieter, is giving a chamber or someplace for that water to go. Because this tube right here is gonna go up. It goes up pretty high, it makes a turn, and then it exits the boat, which means while it's running, that vertical tube has water in it, as the exhaust is coming out. So the second you turn the engine off, that water drains back down, and you don't want it to go into the exhaust or the turbo. And so it stays in here. So that's why the volume of this is calculated. Yeah, I mean, the bigger the better, right?
That's what she said.
So as you can see, it's imperative that we get the gooseneck right. And after doing as much research as I could, there's still no replacement for years of expertise in designing these systems. So I decided to call in the big guns on this one.
I got some information back from Steve at Marine Diesel, who delivered the 90 for us, and I kind of asked him a bunch of questions about how high the exhaust hose should come up, and he answered my questions. It's not an exact science, but he gave me some rules to follow, and in general, we want to make it as high as possible without making it too high, because the higher you make it, the more the diesel engine has to push the exhaust with the cooling water up that tube and come down. So you want to keep it low in that regard, but you also want to keep it high because you want to keep it a certain distance above the water line of the boat. For example, if a sailboat is heeled over, which on Delos 1 we have to worry about, but on Delos 2 we don't have to worry about. But he also brought up the consideration as, what if we go aground on one hole on a sandbank or something, and the boat does heel over a little bit, we still want that exit to be above the water line. And then if waves are hitting the side of the boat while we're sailing, we still want there to be some rise in that to keep the water from going up through the loop and then back down to the water lock. And so it's kind of a fine balance. So I have a little picture I will flash up on the screen right now, which is a drawing that I sent to Steve of what I think is good in between given both of those situations. And now I'm going to cut the exhaust hose and fit it in there and then make a couple of brackets. So this is the exhaust hose right here from Vetus. It is 90 millimeter inside diameter, and I'm going to cut a 2 meter length of that, fit it, and then make my brackets to suit that. Well, I got that exhaust tubing kind of like roughly placed where I wanted it. That stuff's pretty hard to work with. I mean, it's flexible, but it takes a lot of force to get it into place. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fix one end on the exhaust exit, and then I'm gonna measure my brackets out. And I found some scrap. I'm gonna make some brackets out of it. So this guy right here, I will just cut this to length. I always like to sand it, because it just kind of gives it a matte kind of finish like the rest of the boat is, and also it gets that top layer of oxidation off, so when we go and weld it, I know I've got a clean bit of aluminum to go with, so we keep some impurities out of the weld. So these pieces are prepped, so this one is going to go on the ceiling like this, and it'll be welded in. And then what I'll probably do is put a piece of rubber down on this to protect it from chafe, and then I would just drill holes in this and then attach it directly to this welded in place. And then these pieces will go vertically on the frame down like this. I'm actually really happy with how the exhaust turned out. It's a nice short run, straight drop to the water lock, and I've got the hose all run, the exit's done, and looks good. Now it's just a matter of finishing touches. Like obviously there's no exhaust clamps on it. I need to permanently mount the exhaust, but other than that, like I think 90% of the work's done.
So that's a wrap on our custom exhaust install. Tune in next week for an episode that I've really been looking forward to as we kick things off with our propulsion system fit out. If you're enjoying following along with the build, make sure and subscribe to our channel and join us for a new video every Friday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.